sunny California. Does anybody know what we have going on in California in about 5 days?
Earthquake?
That's right. That's right. Exactly right. That I'm coming off a big win at Long Beach. So what do you think? What are we going to do? One other quick little advertisement here. How many of you know Charlie Robertson? All right. Well, if you want to hear the news right from the top on everything that has to do with Corvette racing and stay right up with it, you can sign on and ask to be signed on to the list server that serves all that. And now write this down. Send an email to info@gm-motorsportwest.com. info@gm-motorsportwest.com. And that'll put you either on the C7R West list if you're in the West, or C7R Central if you're in the Central or East Coast. So if you want to be on that, feel free to sign on. It costs you nothing. All right. Behind me here, we've got a couple of gentlemen that I don't think are any strangers to anybody in here, and certainly not to me. I know them pretty well. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Doug Fehan and Tommy Milner. How's that working?
All right.
Yeah, I guess, yes.
Well, good afternoon. Welcome. Everybody get a chance to go look at this sinkhole deal we're featuring this month? Have we seen it?
Yeah.
Is that just not truly one of the most incredible things? Things like that just cause my mind to work overtime. When you look at how does, you look how deep that thing is, and then you got to figure out that the 30 feet of stuff that's sitting at the bottom had to fall. I think it had to be 100 feet deep. And how it, what caused it to go, I don't know. It's just, I was just in there, I got the tour, I got to go around the back side, look inside, see that cave. That's one of the most amazing things I think I've ever seen. And to think that we were so brilliant in the construction of the museum that we put that sinkhole in the dome. I mean, someone who didn't do the proper planning would maybe had it in the parking lot or across the street. But we put it in our display dome so that everybody could see it when it happened. Just a brilliant piece of strategy. But anyway, I think it has served a great purpose, and then I think it has brought the Corvette Museum into the eye of people who may never have any idea that there was a museum or any interest in ever coming to the museum. It's been on global news. I was over in Europe and it was featured on TV there. As those of you who live here watch the news at all, I mean, every major network, every major cable network, not only the original issue of the sinkhole, but it was like a brand new news day every time a car was removed from it. Well, featuring tonight, we got the 4th car out of the sinkhole. I mean, everybody on the planet got to know that. I was, to be able to leverage that into a positive. I think Mendel and the staff here deserve a great deal of credit for, number one, the professionalism with which they handled something like that, and then to be able to leverage it to move our museum forward is just a great thing. So I just thought I'd throw that out for opening remarks. Tommy and I are here today. We're fresh off of a reasonable outing at Long Beach. And I think just for opening remarks, we had obviously results that were not in keeping with what our original goal might have been at both Daytona and Sebring. But I think when you look at how we performed during the race, while the cars were running, was pretty good. You know, you never make excuses. We don't at Corvette Racing. There are reasons things happen. Those reasons are never to be construed as an excuse. But on background, you really need to understand where we were in the fall of last year. We're in an absolute dogfight to win that championship. Our guys are focused on those cars. The thing you never see was back at the shop, where they were working probably twice as hard as that to get these new cars designed, elements of it built, total cars constructed, try and do some testing on them. Because we didn't have the luxury of debuting at Sebring, which is in the middle of March. We had to be ready at the end of January. To have those three things take place, battling for the championship, putting cars together, and doing it on that compressed time frame, I don't know there's another team in this country, and probably the world, that could have accomplished all that with the manpower and resources that we had. So by the time we get to Daytona, which was a miracle in and of itself, to be able to run and lead that race, pretty much a miracle in itself. To have the unfortunate circumstances that we had there occur, something that hadn't ever occurred before, and there's reasons for that. You know, it's sad, but you had to look at the positive side of it. We led those races, and a testament, I think, to the value that the guys put into it and their hard effort, and what we took out of that was when you look at, you know, there's a championship inside a championship this year. The Patron Endurance Championship is the Daytona, Sebring, I think Watkins Glen is a 6-hour, and then Petit Le Mans. So there's 4 of the longest races have their own internal endurance championship. And although we didn't necessarily have great finishing at those first 2 endurance races, I think we're only 1 or 2 points behind Porsche in that championship, because they award points at various stages during the race, not just on the final outcome. And I think that's a real testament to how well we performed, in the fact that we're still in this thing. I mean, we're right there without ever winning either one of them. So Porsche won both of them, and they're only 1 or 2 points ahead of us. So, I mean, it's going to be a very interesting championship. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Tommy. I know he has some opening remarks for you.
Morning, guys. Morning. Or afternoon now, I guess. It is morning somewhere. It's good to be here again. Walking in from my car there out in the field somewhere. Not quite as nice parking spaces as you guys get with all your Corvettes, but I understand that. There were a lot of cars here, which is obviously cool to see, and I think part of that has to do with the new car, the C7, a lot more interest and just something new, and kind of invigorates you guys again about being passionate about the Corvette brand, and you know, it's great to be here on our side, from the racing side, and you know, hopefully we do you guys proud with what we do on the racetrack. It's been a great couple of years that I've been with this team, and I know they've been, you know, super strong before my time here. So you know, we're looking forward to getting more wins with this new C7R. We came pretty close there, as Doug said. It's Daytona and Sebring. If we kind of go back and kind of replay those races a little bit from our perspective. The 3-car had some issues in both those races, but ended up finishing fairly strong. And then, you know, our car was strong basically all throughout the entire both those races. I really thought that we had Sebring didn't have it won for sure. I knew that we had some good competition behind us, but just some unlucky. You know, again, it's a new car, and as Doug said again, that super compressed time schedule. You know, some of those things that you might find in testing that we would in those times that we had in years past before Sebring to go testing and kind of prove some of those new parts. Those show up in racing, and that's why we go racing, is to, you know, improve the race cars, improve the street cars, and you know, finding those things, and we found a couple weak points with the car, and you know, the guys have obviously worked hard to fix those things, and that'll be a pretty important test coming up here in a few weeks, almost a month now, something like that, for Le Mans. So you know, certainly those first 2 races, and then obviously at Long Beach, were focused on what's happening here in the U.S., but definitely have one eye kind of aimed towards Le Mans and showing well at that race. So again, it's great to be here, and
All right. Anybody had a chance on their visit down here?
I'll let Doug talk forever, because he's good at that.
Blah, 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 blah. Blah, 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 blah. Blah, blah. I love hearing myself. Have any of you had a chance to get over to the Motorsports Park on your trip down? Show of hands. Okay, not very many. And I don't know if we're organizing tours to go over there, whether you can go over on your own. I just saw the latest aerial photograph. They've got a process going down. They put down some kind of crushed concrete base, and then there's a tar spray goes over the top of it, and then that settles and cures, and then we begin the asphalt paving. That place is going to be magnificent. When I was here last fall, I came down to get a little status look at that, and we were pulling around, and I drove in. And those of you who have been around for a while know I've been a fairly strong advocate of the Motorsports Park, to the point of just coming up short of putting a gun to each and every one of your heads to donate, laying the big guilt trip on you, and you've responded quite well, thank you very much. But when we pulled in there and I looked at that acreage all flattened out and they had just about completed the finished grading, my first thought was, oh my God, what have we done? I'm thinking, this is, you know, it's one of those things, be careful what you ask for, you just might get it. It would just look so expansive and so huge. I'm thinking, how can we do this? How are we doing this? It is amazing to me to think about it. I mean, the building we're in, you built. When we go over to that racetrack and we're running cars on there this Labor Day for opening ceremonies, you built that. There's no other car brand or manufacturer in the world that can say that, okay? Because it's usually just, you know, moves up the corporate ladder and you get a friendly president or CEO or president of the board who says, oh, we're going to do this, and, you know, then the company goes and builds it. This is built by people who have such a passion for their automobile that they're willing to spend their own money to dedicate not only museum-like thing, but a racetrack. And as I said, you know, we're fortunate to be here. Somebody came before us and built this. Somebody came before us, recognized the need, demonstrated the passion, and ponied up and got it done. That racetrack is going to be our legacy to the groups that come after us. And that's our responsibility to do that. And you guys have answered the bell, and I'm going to continue, obviously, to press so that we can, you know, sell more acres, sell more paving. This place is going to be absolutely magnificent. Every aspect of this facility is first class. From the way they've graded, to the materials they're using in the surface, to the facilities themselves, the garages, the tower, the skid pad, all that is just as well thought out as you could possibly do that. We've had great partners in the Western Kentucky University. I mean, this is going to be an economic engine for this region, not just for Bowling Green as a city, because it will, but for the entire region. This is going to inspire growth. This is going to inspire more business to locate here, whether it be restaurant, hotels, tech development stuff. I mean, it's remarkable what we're doing as a Corvette community, because it's not just for us. It's for this whole region. And I want you to give yourselves a round of applause for that, because you've done a marvelous job. And with that, as a time always being a crunch here, because we can talk endlessly, as I always do, I think we have the most fun when we open it up for questions, because usually it's really hard to get the first person to raise their hand, and then there's folks in the back already. And then there'll be 100 more. So let's start right back here, all the way in the back.
All right, Tommy, at Long Beach, you were behind the Beamer, and you were catching him. 5 more laps, would you caught him?
Yeah, that's tough there. I mean, I caught the BMW fairly quickly. Our car was really good. I think I had fastest race lap and fastest average lap time or something like that. So car was quick for sure. The 3 car, Antonio had a great start. There was 2 LMP cars that were just ahead of him based on how the qualifying order was. And one of those cars was Ed Brown, who is a great guy and does a lot for our series, but needs a little bit more time in those prototype cars to get going as quickly as he probably could go. So that allowed Antonio to get by. He got by Ed Brown there in the LMP car, and they were pretty much, he was running similar speeds to us, but maybe just a tenth or 2 slower than us, and that allowed Antonio to build a nice gap, and so he had a nice 13, 14 second lead. And fortunately, because that race was only the professional drivers, or classes basically, just the prototype class and our GTLM class, which is just supposed to be just professional drivers in those classes. There was no cautions. No one really made any big mistakes. So that was in our class. That was sort of the race. And to your point there with the BMW, Oliver basically, everyone else behind him got kind of, everyone else behind the prototype car got kind of held back, and so there was this gaggle of 7 or 8, 9 GT cars all together. So the pit stops were important there, and then coming out of the pits, when I got in the car to finish the race, there was about an 8 or 9 second gap to the BMW, and I chased him down fairly quickly, but I think he was playing it cool for the first couple laps, and then when I got to him, then I could tell that he had a bit more speed left over, and he used every bit of it then at that point, and we were super, super close. And I didn't think about it at the time, but if you guys remember a little bit last year at VIR, the same white BMW and the same driver roughed me up pretty good on a number of occasions. And to be honest, I didn't think about that in the race, and that's probably a good thing I didn't think about that, because I don't think
That's a good thing to think about.
I would have been a little bit more aggressive with him, but you know, I knew that after our first 2 races we showed, as Doug said, throughout the race we had fast cars, and the cars were competitive, and we just didn't get those results that we deserved with how we had done Daytona and Sebring. So in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, I'm gonna push as hard as I possibly can and see if I can make him make a mistake, and then I can get by easily. But it's tough to pass there at Long Beach, and I had a couple opportunities where I may possibly have kind of gotten underneath him into turn 1 in the brake zone, but it would have been sort of a coin toss there if both of us came out, or just one of us, or none of us, basically.
Those third place points look pretty good now, don't they?
Third place points feel pretty good. As much as I want to win the race or finish second and get a 1-2, you know, getting points at this point now matters for sure. So it wasn't until after the race that my engineer Chuck reminded me that it was Dirk last year who roughed me up pretty good, and I was a little upset that I kind of forgot about that, but then, as Doug alluded to there, it's a good thing I didn't think about that in the race, and I just drove a smart race there.
Yes. And by the way, the drivers nor the engineers pay for crash damage.
That's a good thing.
Yeah. All right, who's next?
And I understand the growing pains, but if they talk to the teams, or are they putting things in place so future you won't be having long cars penalized?
Well, that would be really desirable. And to your point, you know, there are growing pains. So for the first 2 races, I think all the competitors have pretty much, at this point, resigned themselves to the fact you're not going to change the past. Let's, you know, quit looking in the rearview mirror, let's look out the windshield. But they haven't come to us. As you can imagine, we have gone to them as a group and been fairly proactive. To that point, in Long Beach, we had our first in about 10 years manufacturers meeting with the powers that be, where we had a very open, candid, and direct conversation regarding their performance on the racetrack rather than our performance on the racetrack. What occurred, and these are pretty much their words, not mine, was indefensible. I mean, there is no excuse, there is no reason. It was just inept, unprofessional, and all the words you can possibly think of to describe it. And they're willing to shoulder that because they know it's well-deserved. And they have taken steps to try and improve that, as anyone would. I mean, no one wants to go through and be earmarked like that, because people aren't going to stay. I mean, if it's not professionally run, professionals aren't going to compete. They know they need to improve. We know they need to improve. And we think that they've taken made some initial movement to help ensure the fact that we won't see a replay of that again. I mean, you couldn't make that's a bad movie. I mean, that's a 1-star movie, you put that on film. I mean, and no one's going to believe that. It was incredible what took place. So I think we're well on our way. So we're going to give them a pass on that, but you know, everybody's got their eye on them. I mean, they're not just sitting up here doing what they want to do. We're holding their feet to the fire on this, and thus far they've responded pretty well to it. So, yes, sir.
Okay. Any more balance of power updates for Bundesliga?
let Tommy answer that, because he knows what the balance is on the racetrack and whether anything's necessary. We need a bigger restrictor, lighter weight, fatter tires.
Now, for our class, no changes. I saw that they, for the prototype class, are going to try to help the P2 cars and the DP cars play a bit nicer together. So they're going to take some of the horsepower away from the DP cars, which is some of the Corvettes there, the Corvette DP cars, which I think is good for the class. I would like to keep seeing more P2 cars, that be a part of the series for sure. So it looks like in the first couple races that they weren't super competitive with the DP cars. They can run fast lap times, but they have other issues where they're a lot lighter than the DP cars are, which means it's harder for them to get their tires up to temperature. And that's not a big deal for an endurance race so much because, hopefully you have long running and you can just, that disadvantage isn't a big deal. But for a track like Long Beach there where they were not very good at the start, which is just the nature of the weight of the car and having tires, they're all on the same tire. Yeah. Where I'm definitely happy to be on the Michelin, that's for sure. So for our class, no changes, which is a good thing. I think looking at, we just won Long Beach, so I'm sure if you went to Ferrari or BMW or Porsche and you asked them right now, they'd all say that the Corvette's too fast. But it seems like that our car is great in some places, and the brake zones were very good. Putting power down, we've gotten a lot better this year. We have an all-around good car. We're not the fastest in a straight line. We're not. I think our best place is the brake zones. We're the best in the brake zones of anybody, but we're not the best putting power down. We don't have the most horsepower. We don't have, just based on how the BOP is set up. But it seems like that it's a very good mix for all of us. I think the Ferraris probably has the best BOP sort of rules right now, and I think if they can put a race together, they'll be quick. But for the most part, I think we all play pretty well together.
It's pretty amazing when you look at qualifying, just on a note, and you'll see the top 6 cars will be like within 1/10 of a second of one another. And you really have to put that in perspective because you've got, 8-liter power plant, 5.5-liter power plant, 5-liter, opposed 6-cylinder. I mean, it's incredible to think, different drivers, it's incredible to think that you could actually make that happen. If someone charged you with that, said, here's what we need out of you guys, we need you to take these 4 different manufacturers with these different power plants and make them go around the racetrack all within 1/10 of a second of each other. I mean, it would take you a lifetime to do that. I mean, it's pretty amazing. So it's going to shine at different places. It's going to get a little cloudy at others. And Long Beach was a place that suited us very, very well. And I think Laguna is going to be a similar situation. Le Mans is an outlier. Daytona is an outlier. So that's why everybody goes to the races, to see who wins. I mean, if we knew we were just going to win every one, it'd be just like GT1. We'd put everybody out of business and we'd have nothing to talk about. Yes, sir. So the foundation of your question really is who's the best BSer? Well, who just won Long Beach? I feel pretty comfortable about the fact that the management that's in place that is making the balance of performance decisions is pretty much doing so like the Lady of Justice blindfolded, that they're really looking at the data and they're using that to drive their decisions. And I think the results that we've seen, that not necessarily in the finish of the race, but performance during the race and in the qualifying, has shown that to be pretty true. Sandbagging is an element of the sport. It's been a building block, a foundation of motorsports forever. With the technology that's out there today, the way we can measure things, it's reducing the ability for us or anybody else to sandbag. And once you really narrow that up, then you're going to see really true balance of performance. And I think we're on the threshold of getting that done. And I think we have the people in place. If there's a positive, the technical side of this new series is very, very strong. And so I'm pretty comfortable that good decisions are going to be made. So politics that used to maybe play a role don't play so much anymore. And that's both here and at Le Mans. So that's a positive thing. Move forward. Yes, sir?
Could you go over a little bit about what broke and why they come in the
Yeah, if I can remember back, let me think.
It wasn't my fault.
Yeah, it wasn't. Tommy had nothing to do with it. The issue at Daytona in broad paint with a broad brush here, overheating problem. As we developed the new car, we utilized a new radiator. And this is most of you are familiar with old production cars. Used to be brass tanks, and then of course aluminum radiators, and that's what we raced with forever. This new radiator we're using is a stainless steel radiator. It's a very unique setup. The reason that we use stainless steel is because the tubes, which are normally, you could just look in them and see where the water passages go. I mean, you can visually see the tubes if you cut the tank off it. This new stainless steel radiator is all micro drilled with holes almost the size of a human hair. And it has to be stainless steel to facilitate that level of machining. And there's thousands of them in this radiator. It allows us to use a smaller radiator, which means we can improve the downforce and balance capabilities on the car because we're moving more air over the car and less air through the car. All right? So we spent the better part of last year in our off season in developing this new cooling system. We had an issue arise at Daytona that hadn't really shown up at the level it did. All the testing we do in private, so there's only 2 cars on the racetrack. Well, you put 62 cars on a racetrack and the dynamic can change. We learned that in our debut there in 1999 with our air filtration system. It's a different dynamic. We developed an air pocket in both cars, an air pocket in the cooling system, which was causing, as that air pocket would move around, there was no cooling taking place that forced that air pocket through all the same channels that the water would move through. So there's no heat transfer. So we were getting tremendous spikes in the engine cooling, tremendous spikes, and that eventually caused a head gasket failure. All right, and at that point in time, in addition to that, we were having, as that bubble moved through, it would cause the overheating, and then that would spit the water out the overflow. The overflow's on the bottom of the car, so the drivers are driving through it, and they would encounter a spin that was occurring for no reason. Nothing on the racetrack.
Not me. Not me.
Not Tommy. Nothing on the racetrack. The car would just in the braking zone lose control and spin out. So fortunately we didn't crash a car, and that's why we elected in the case of the 4-car to discontinue. We had, or 3-car, excuse me. We had, we tried to bleed that through. By the time we found it on the 3-car, the damage had been done. 4-car was the first one to experience it, and we just got lucky on the 4-car and happened to have the bubble in a place where we could bleed it off. So we've got that pretty well resolved right now. We made some plumbing changes to the car. We've eliminated the opportunity for that air bubble to gather, so we think we're on our way to getting that done. Transaxle's a different story. We have bearing failure. We've had bearing failure before. We thought we had it fixed and identified. We didn't. I think we're well on the way now to having that completed. So, Tommy, I don't know if you want to add anything. I know you spent some time with the engineers going over that, but.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a whole lot that, the piece, the transaxle, the gearbox, it's not something that Brett Miller designs or the Corvette Racing designs and builds, things like that. It's a supplier's part. And obviously I work together with them to make the parts that we need for the car. And that was a piece that, we found obviously a problem with it at Daytona there. And they worked together to figure out, how they can fix and improve that part so it doesn't happen again. And wasn't a problem at Sebring, and hopefully it's not a problem again. And from what, again, but this has happened in the past, as Doug has said, and it kind of happens somewhat randomly. But this last time they looked at it and they've improved the part to the point where everyone feels pretty confident. Okay, this should no longer be an issue. But like anything in racing, when you drive these cars as hard as we do and hit the curbs a lot like we do sometimes, you know, you find other weak points in the car, and you know, so these cars are definitely not bulletproof by any means, but they are pretty close to it. And we're pushing them as hard as we possibly can, so things like this happen every now and then, and it's just a part of racing.
You know, it's a new car, and as I said, none of these are excuses. They are reasons why things happen. And it's always easy to go back and say what you could have done or should have done. And the measure here isn't the error or a finger point or, you know, is it X-Trac's fault or what's wrong with the plumbing guys. The reality of this is how quickly you can identify the problem and then how rapidly you can implement design changes and then get parts built, get it on the race car, get it validated, and then go moving forward. And our group at Corvette Racing is pretty darn good at that. And that's what we've done in these two issues. So that's the only way you can, it's the only way you move forward. Yes, sir?
Change the subject a little bit. Are you going to be using Motorsport Park to test in 2015?
Have you donated yet? Hmm?
Have I donated?
Have you donated yet?
Yes.
Yes.
2
2
acres.
acres. Hands together, 2 acres. Well, thank you very much. Yes, we are going to be using Motorsports Park to do test and development. We played, and a confluence of things, I've told this story before, I won't bore you with it again, just a set of circumstances that I happened to be down here on a day when they began the initial discussions. Wendell asked me in, and he had me hook, line, and sinker. But we used our engineering facilities at Pratt Miller to help design the park, to give us a shape and surface that will benefit us that we can't find anyplace else to test with. So it will be invaluable development place for us. Yes, we will be using it, and keep our fingers crossed. Is Todd Christensen in here? Todd, any place? Todd is our new marketing guy for Corvette, and we're working with him. Hopefully the race team will have some presence here at those opening ceremonies. And if I have my wish and dream fulfilled, the first lap will be run with a race car. Yes, sir.
C7R compared to C6R?
Yeah, so the question was, how does the C6R compare to the C7R? And
C7's way more expensive.
that doesn't bother me.
Just less money for pay.
That does bother me. C7, obviously we started testing it last year. If some of you were at Laguna Seca, you got sort of your first glimpse of it there and a couple demo laps, and that was my first laps in the car. And then right from there, the car went and just did quite a bit of testing with Ian and Oliver. So my first laps were not until Sebring about November of last year, and my first laps in the car, I was pretty blown away right away. Now obviously the car had some testing and some sort of proving a little bit with setup and things like that, but right away at Sebring we noticed, and I think you've maybe read this multiple times now, but it's something that was pretty important for Sebring, is right away over the bumps at Sebring at 17 and 1. The car was massively better. I mean, better than any race car I've ever driven over the bumps at Sebring, and to the point where I was questioning if they actually had done any resurfacing work on the racetrack. It felt like they had basically taken the bumps in turn 1 and knocked them down about half as big as they used to be. So that stems from the street car side and a stiffer chassis, which helps us in the race car. So that piece right there already, we talk about the transfer from street car to race car and how that transfer is like no other car company in the world that races right now. The amount of information and work that goes into that, how much work there is between the two race car side and street car side, is again like I've never seen before in any of the other teams I've raced with in the past. So it's pretty cool to see that amount of development between both sides, and then see it play out on the racetrack like that. And that was an immediate, something that I felt right away. I thought, I was sort of almost laughing to myself in the car. I was like, that is awesome. You know, I mean, we spend so much time at Sebring trying to figure out how to make the car work better with the bumps, and all of a sudden, right there, you know, a fundamental piece of the car that you can't really change or update or fix with the current generation car, but you can with, you know, the next generation car like we have with C7. So right there, a big piece that was changed and updated makes a street car better, makes our race car better. So that was one area right away where I thought, man, this thing's going to be awesome. And then the more you drove it, the car was put power down better, which again kind of goes back to a little bit the chassis being stiffer. And you know, in years past, when you start really loading the rear tires and trying to get the drive off the corner, that you know you can control as much of that sort of squat in the car, or you know, in some cases you might want some, but at some point when you have some of these variables that you can't always account for so much with spring rates and different damper settings, things like that, you lose some of the control that you have with the setup of the car through the chassis and some of those bending forces. So again, the car put power down better at Sebring. I mean, right away, immediately noticed the thing. And then, so those two areas I think stand out the most, putting power down, and those are two areas where you can feel the car is just it's a stiffer chassis, but it's a more, I don't know, complete race car. It feels more sporty. It feels faster. It feels, you know, every little input that you were giving it, you get better feedback from the car at that point. And that was one thing too that I noticed, that one of the first things I told my engineers was I felt like at the limit when I'm really working the car hard, a little bit sideways in places, that I had more at the window. So for racing, maybe try to make it a little bit more simple, that you know, we drive the cars through every corner basically on the edge of spinning out and being too slow. So that window in years past with C6 was, every race car, that window's fairly small with the way that the racing slicks work and things like that, that your window for where the tire works its best, that slip angle is fairly small compared to a street tire in some cases, but even so the window's narrower, you've got way more grip at that point. So I noticed with C7 that window now, even so the tires are a little bit different, but I mean, same general characteristics. So that window now is just a little bit bigger. So now I can drive it a little bit more sideways in places and get a little bit more grip, a little more speed out of the car before I'd have to make a big correction if I went too far. So that was another area there where I felt like this is, you know, so everything so far, my first feeling with the car, I was like, this thing's better here, it's better there, it's better here, it's better there. And then, I mean, so right away I was like, this is gonna be a great race car. And then the more we drove it, the more we kind of got used to a little things here and there. It basically does everything as good as C6 did, and it does a lot of things a lot better than C6 did. So it's been a great, it's been a lot of fun to drive the car and see that change from C6 to C7 now. And they even thought about the drivers too. Now my seat's a bit more comfortable, the steering wheel is a little bit better place for me, and there's less stuff to confuse me on the steering wheel now, so I take care of the drivers every now and then.
Yeah, thank you for that. Tommy touched on something that I want to just take a moment to elaborate a little bit on. Did anyone attend Tadge's seminar this morning that talked about? Good. You know, I've been blessed in my career at GM to work with every chief engineer with the exception of Zora, and I'm not quite that old. And they all, in and of themselves and unique to themselves, have been great guys. You know, whether it's Tom or Dave or you name it, they wonderful people. Limited by working inside a system that seems to be designed to prevent you from doing the best job you can do. Every time you had a good idea, there were 20 reasons why we couldn't do it. And as I often told them, if it's a good idea, we find a way to do it. It's easy to invent excuses why we can't. Tadge learned from all that. Now, Tadge is a very humble guy, very dedicated guy, and a brilliant engineer, and a wonderful, inspirational team leader. Tadge took what was arguably a great sports car and made it clearly into the world's finest sports car. It's undeniable on every level. It is the most awarded, as you saw this morning, car in the history of the automobile. He led the fight to give Tommy what he needed. This chassis thing that he mentioned this morning, they don't even allow people in to see because of the level of technology that they're using to build this thing with, came from his inspiration to lead and get better and have continuous improvement. He had, just like I'm just in front of something that's moving someplace. I'm lucky to be the face. Taj gets actively involved, but he has a team of hundreds of people who share that passion and that same dedication to build the absolute best. Not just good enough, not just better than what we had, but the best that we can do. And Taj was a guy who had learned the ropes. He had seen all the travails that you went through with management to try and do the right thing, be prevented from doing so, the frustration that you live with. And Taj took up that fight, and at every turn, he fought to the death to get what he needed to make this the best car. There were still those inside that probably didn't appreciate the efforts he was making. There were some that did. At the end of the day, when that product rolled off the assembly line, and every automotive writer on the planet couldn't say enough about it, they were convinced, and I think everybody at GM Management learned a lesson, that sometimes there's a benefit to doing things the right way. And Taj led that way. That guy right there is who's responsible for this C7, making it happen and giving us what we needed. That technology transfer story is not just a story, it's real. And there's no car company in the world that can even remotely approach the level of transfer that we have between street and production. So when you see Taj, take a moment, thank him. Because I say, he's a humble guy. He is a great leader, and we at Racing appreciate every one of his efforts. Next question. Yes, sir.
Explain a little bit about your paddock building or whatever you call it.
What the hell is that? That's Doug's Golf Dome. We just hang a Corvette banner in the front of it when we go racing. We leave that set up at the shop all around. For those of you who may not, the question was, can we explain our new paddock setup? Let's call it a setup. Those that have come to the race, anybody go to the races here? Okay, so you know, we pull a couple trailers up, we put some awnings off it, one car goes in one side, one car goes in the other, pretty much standard, everybody has the same thing. Gary Pratt's a very quiet guy, but up here, who knows what's going on. 2 or 3 years ago, he came to me with this drawing that he had researched and had done that showed this inflatable, for lack of a better term, dome that would move from one trailer to the other with no center support and was operated like air pressure, like the Silver Dome or the old dome in Minneapolis. It operates like one of these jump houses. You know, you see these kids, right, and they put the fan on, it blows it. That's what this is. There's giant tubes that move from trailer to trailer that are inflated with fans, and they cause you to have this big structure. So, obviously, I thought it was a great idea, but then you gotta find somebody to pay for it. You know, that's a problem. So, I mean, I strategically made a couple inroads, not necessarily asking for that year, but tell them this is what we're looking for in the future. And as we process through the current materials that we have and that a replacement's going to be required, that this might be something that we want to think about, knowing full well that C7 was coming. My strategy was to wait until the introduction of the C7 so that we could kind of pile on all the great things that were going to happen with C7 and maybe wouldn't get noticed that much. And it worked. So our story was, and we're sticking to it, when we have the big debut of C7, we want to have the new deal, and that's what it is. The thing is amazing. You know, actually the space between trailers, because we have more cars in the paddock now, the series has limited us. They knocked us, I don't know, 4 or 5 feet shorter distance. But when you see this thing inflated, I mean, it's like we have half the paddock. The reason for it is the roof is probably 25, 30 feet high. It's massive inside. You way in the back.
Yeah, Doug, I'm interested in knowing different tracks call for different gear ratios, I assume. Is this both a differential and gearbox change, and how do you make the decision on how to do that?
I'm going to let Tommy start on that. We'll fill in blanks if there are any. But on background, Tommy and all the other drivers, after every session on the track, download with the engineers. And to your point, gear selection is of primary importance to the performance of the car on a track. Tommy, go ahead, tell me a little bit about that process.
Yeah, that's thankfully that's not a job for me to decide, because if it were up to me to decide what gear rest we should use, we'd be lost. Thankfully, there's some smart guys that work on the race team there, and they have different computer programs and things like that, and they'll take a power curve that the GM powertrain guys give to our engineers, and that shows us basically the engine that we'll use for the race. It shows us exactly what the dyno was for that motor, and they can then analyze in their computer programs and figure out exactly, with RPM drops after a gear change, things like that, exactly what the optimal gear ratios would be to make the most power at all times. Now, there's certain racetracks where sometimes you have to make a compromise because you want to, hold one gear longer than you should, and sometimes we can keep those optimal gear ratios and just ask for a bit more RPM before we get to the limiter. And then in other cases, we just run out of gear completely, and then us as drivers, as Doug said, after a session, after we drive with the gear ratios that are optimal, so to speak, we'll go back and we'll discuss with all the drivers. We'll talk about it a little bit, and we'll say, okay, actually it'd be better, if we had maybe a longer second gear because of X, Y, Z, because we want to be able to run second gear longer in this corner or something like that. So for the most part, the gear ratios that we run at the start of the weekend are what we end up racing, but there's definitely times that we go to a racetrack, and if we have, with this new car, there's times now where we've found more often that there's little places here and there that we'd like to make little small adjustments as far as the ratios go, but maybe we don't have that gear ratio, and at that point now we're talking about just absolute fine-tuning things, and oftentimes the crew guys are not super anxious to make a gearbox change for one gear for one guy who's complaining because it's a little bit too hard for him to pull the paddle now a little bit later or something. So.
You sound just like me. I like that.
So there's we as drivers, we definitely don't have a whole lot to complain about anymore. There's, my drink bottle's not working very well, or the air's not cold enough, or the paddle's too hard to pull. It's funny that, nowadays when I talk with like my father or Bobby Rahal, some of the guys that have raced in the past, they always give me a hard time. They're like, man, back when I drove, we had to use a clutch for every shift, and we didn't have any water bottles, and we drove for 4 hours at a time, and you guys have it easy now. And in some cases, yeah, we definitely do have it easy, but everybody has those luxuries now, and so now we have to find an advantage over another driver, another car, is now you're really splitting hairs now. So I would argue with those guys that it's just as difficult now as it was back in their time, but they don't want to hear that.
The other side of it is, back in their time, when something went south, they could come in and make up any story they wanted as to what happened. In today's world, as Tommy will testify, we know everything going on inside that car. When it happened and why it happened, they ain't no making up nothing. You might as well just come in with your hat in your hand and your chin on your chest, because we know what you did. So Ray Hall and Milner Sr., for all their racing years, they had the best stories, and you could do the T-shirt, Car in front of me threw dirt up on the racetrack. Anyway, next question. Yes, sir.
You're still using that radar technology to set the cars behind you. How's that working out? And is there any other manufacturers, something like that?
Yeah, we still have that same radar system that we've had in years past. So the rear view camera that we have to use in the car by the rules, we've over the last 2 years, the Corvette Racing and Bosch have worked together to build this computer program, essentially, where it shows us, the cars that are coming up behind us, whether they're catching us very quickly or if they're going away from us, and what side of the car they've passed us on now. We have a sort of a newer version of it basically this year that Bosch has done, and I think part of that is it's just the same basic functions and everything. It's a little bit more fine-tuned, and it's designed now. The idea of the whole thing is to sell it to our competitors, unfortunately. That was a nice little advantage, but And certainly in many cases, it's a lot safer for sure. You know, that was one place where maybe, you know, that doesn't help us over a fast lap, but over a long race, it's just one less thing that you have to really study and think about on the racetrack, because now it's always in your peripheral vision, and it's very easy with the way that they've developed it for us to, you know, focus more on what we're doing with our race car and the cars that we're trying to pass. We obviously still keep a close eye on what's happening behind us, but with the way that functions now, and because of with a camera like that, it's harder. You sort of lose some of that depth perception a little bit as far as what cars are coming. With mirrors, there's some spatial awareness there still that was lost with the camera. So that radar system that they developed definitely brought some of that, or a lot of that depth perception back, and makes it easier for us now through traffic to allow faster cars to go by at more opportune times for both of us, or that way we're not losing as much time.
On background for that radar, we worked in conjunction with Bosch. Bosch owned the processor, and it was not something that's available to anybody. They don't sell it to anybody. It is used on items like if you have a new Cadillac that has the blind spot thing, there's a car in your blind spot, and you go to turn into that, it vibrates your seat. I mean, there have been very, very, very simplistic applications of a very, very sophisticated processor that Bosch owned. We recognized that at Pratt Miller and wanted to bring that in-house because we thought we could develop it further, hence the development of the radar system. Pratt Miller developed the entire system using that Bosch processor. And in that partnership, when we got done, we turned over all our stuff to Bosch as part of the agreement, and Bosch is now marketing that to the motorsports community. I made a presentation about a year ago. I sit on a sporting working group, a global sporting working group, FIA committee over in Paris, and I made that presentation to them last year based on the value of this tool as a safety item, not necessarily a performance, although the two are directly connected. The idea of spreading this out to the others is that obviously it gives us at various times an advantage, both from a performance and safety standpoint. But if you take that to its logical conclusion, if everybody had this, we might not have incidents that we've had. Others might be more aware of where we are and what we're doing. So, and that's the way they saw it there, that this could be one of the most significant major safety advances in motorsports if everybody had this on board. And we may or may not get there. We're going to continue to use it because we know it works for us. So, next question. Yes? Pardon me? Did it win a motorsports award? Yes, it did. Yes, it did. As a matter of fact, it was an international, quite a prestigious international award for innovation and safety in motorsports. It was, thank you for bringing that up. Yes, it did. Yes, sir?
Doug, are you gonna be going back to Mid-Ohio at all?
Yeah, I'll be going back to Mid-Ohio. I date a girl there. Oh, it means the race team going back. Here's the deal. Those of you that listen to me at Corrales know that when I can, I give you the inside scoop, something that you may not read or others may be portraying in a different light. Mid-Ohio changed hands a couple years ago. Michelle Truman, who has been a lifelong friend of mine, mega wealthy, had no reason to bother herself with the race, sold the racetrack. The new owners of the racetrack fall just a little bit south of the reasonable line in doing business with. Consequently, for the last couple of years, the sanctioning body has been unable to reach a satisfactory agreement with them to bring a race there. That's not by the racers group choice, it's just by the inability to. What was is no longer acceptable to the new guy. So, are we working to change that? Yes. I know we won't be there this year. There's an outside chance we may be there next year. We continue to work at that because it's a great facility. It essentially is our home track. So there's some distinct benefits for us to be there, but at the end of the day, it has to be a mutually rewarding experience for both the sanctioned body and for the track owner. So we're gonna leave that to them to get it hammered out. Our desire would be to go back, and we're hoping that that comes to fruition. Yes?
I'm going to put this in a different way than I would.
Why?
Because you and I have discussed many times.
Easy now, where are you going with this? No, I can't, I'm sorry.
About the fan perspective, and a lot of us fans are older, we're not into this new technology, we're gonna follow a race on our computer. People have some money in here, they build home theaters to watch the race in, big screens. And even when I go to a race, I take it from home and see what happens the rest of the race or on the rest of the track. What can we as fans do to get this coverage back? And it's gotta be important for sponsorship, because if the sponsors aren't seeing their names come around on that track on TV, what are they there for?
Duh. You mean 3 hours of Sebring wasn't enough when there was an hour of yellow flag in mixed? Yeah, well, lucky you.
What can Charlie, who has a huge email list, what can we do as fans, and everybody in here do?
Just outside of Pahrump, Nevada, is a great combat handgun school called Front Sight. And my suggestion would be to head down your sporting goods store, get your AR-15, get about 10,000 rounds of ammo, head out to Front Sight, get that combat training, get some camo, get some Suburbans, black, head down to Daytona, surround the damn building, and threaten them with their lives. That would be my suggestion. This is something that is always an area of contention. And it, as frustrating as it is for you guys as fans, it's equally frustrating for drivers, crew guys, families of crew guys, and certainly for me. To your point, at some point in time, somebody's going to question the value of TV at all if it's as poor as it's been. And when that occurs, we don't get to do this anymore. So you can take comfort in knowing that none of this is just bypassing. I sat down with, and I'm not talking about school, I sat down with the Porsche guys at Long Beach, and we had this very discussion about what kind of strategy we have to employ to try and get improvement on this. It has been a constant source of frustration for the last 3 years, now further troubled by the fact that we have Speed gone away, Fox 1 Sports, which is not totally dedicated to solely motorsports. We've got to try and get this thing worked through. They need to begin to understand the importance of proper TV, and that doesn't mean when you have a 2-hour show, you have 1 hour worth of commercials, okay? All those things that you recognize, we pay close attention to. So none of it's wasted on us. We just have to work hard to make it better. They have to understand that they're only helping themselves when they do that. The new group, more so than the old group, has a much finer point on profitability. Whether it's providing, I used to get promotional tickets for each event. Not a lot, but a couple. And that gave me the flexibility to go out to community leaders or wherever I saw, or the hot little barmaid, hand out free tickets, get people to come to the event, expose racing to those that may not have seen it before, and at the end of the day, it's a zero cost to them, okay? And it's a great promotional tool. Well, that doesn't exist anymore. I had a story today from someone who will go unnamed, who's volunteering at one of the events, helping the event go on, and she gets to do that because she gets to buy her own ticket to get in. Huh? So that's what we're dealing with. That's a NASCAR mentality. It works in NASCAR. I'm of the personal opinion it's probably not going to work that well in sports car racing because we don't operate that way. So I've made it my mission to try and begin to initiate some change in that thought process. and demonstrate to them that there are other ways of doing business than the way they have always done it. And we'll see how that goes. You know, hopefully I'll remain employed for a little while longer and it doesn't cause me to get fired, but that's never stopped me before. Yes, sir?
Can you run down the Le Mans driver lineup?
Well, we'll let Tom do the driver introductions.
In the 74 car, because that's the best car, it'll be myself, Oliver Gavin, and Richard Westbrook. In the 73 car, Ian, Antonio, and Jordan Taylor. So for this year, at Daytona Sebring, we had, in the 3 car, we had Ryan Briscoe for a long distance driver, and then in our car, we had Liddell. Sorry, I knew his
That other guy.
Robin Liddell. Great guy, love Robin.
Yeah.
Too many names. And we did that because those guys, yeah. We did that because Jordan and Richard race full-time in the DP class, or prototype class, but they obviously have experience with these cars in general at Le Mans with the team, so they'd be the best fit for that race for sure, and I know those guys want to do that race, so really great to have those guys back in the car. They'll test the C7 for the first time here just after the Laguna. We test it in Wisconsin there, so be kind of fun to see their reaction to drive the car for the first time. They don't get to feel it in full high downforce trim like we have. They get to feel it with basically the wing the wrong way, is what it always looks like. Every year we go to Le Mans, every one of us drivers look at the rear wing, and so that would be normal for most racetracks. And we get to Le Mans and things like this, and we're thinking, that's not right. That doesn't look like fun. But the cars are always fairly well balanced. In 2011 and 12, the cars were fairly lively to drive. So we're hoping that maybe it's not quite as lively this year, but if it's fast, doesn't matter. If it's fast and it's a handful of drive, as long as it's fast, it's all that matters.
Yes, sir?
You mentioned the different culture with what you said. You get some kind of food from claim too. I sit here, I watch Sebring, and I've got to go through all kinds of gymnastics. I'm like, Carson, then I go to this, that go. Who don't complain? Comment is noise or uprise, and you get parking. I got the AR-50. It's 20,000 pounds around that.
2600 Speedway Boulevard is your target. If you go on to the IMSA.com website, there's actually blogs that take place there. There's a contact us segment, and I've mentioned this at Corvette Corrals before, because obviously this wasn't the first time this has been brought up this year. Okay, that putting together an organized effort, much like is Charlie here today? Charlie? Oh, you are, sweetie. There's no one in the world, and I mean the world, the whole world, that is better at organizing anything Corvette than Charlie Robbins. So any of you who are interested in mounting the Big Bitch campaign, I think we should use Charlie, as I'm volunteering you, Charlie, as our nucleus, because she has the mailing list, and begin to overwhelm them with what our thoughts are regarding TV. That, generally speaking, is the best way to start that grassroots deal. Now, that's not going to change anything for this year, and who knows how long this contract runs. I'll share this with you as well. The contract for Fox 1 Sports and our race series was just pretty much a throw-in add-on to the NASCAR contract. All right, so in past where we had a mission and a destination and a sense of accomplishment because we were single focused on our own business, which was the American Le Mans Series, that went away. And now because we're part of a much larger conglomerate of business, we're kind of just tacked on at the end, and that's what's caused some of this. So as contracts would change and things would move around, we'd have the opportunity to implement a different approach, and you guys certainly can help influence where we're going with that. But my suggestion would be on the website, let them know what you think. It won't be the first time they've heard it, but if they heard it enough, maybe we begin to institute some change. So that would be my suggestion. Yes, sir?
Tommy, what's your favorite racetrack to drive and why? I know the one you win at, but.
My favorite racetrack in the whole world, one that I could drive by myself in any car and have fun, is the Nürburgring in Germany. That one is far and away my first laps there that I drove myself was in a little Renault A-Class Mercedes, something like that, whatever they gave me at the airport. And I was passing guys and they're putting in Porsches in the wet. So that was a fun experience, just that alone. And then I took 2 years ago, I took some of the engineers to the Nürburgring in a Chevy Orlando van and gave rides to all our engineers in that. And I think I almost made 2 of them throw up, and the third one went for his 4th ride and regretted it halfway through. So just a fun racetrack, and some of the cars that I've raced there more recently. Last time I was there was in a GT3 Callaway Corvette, and that racetrack and those cars, it is so fast, but it's so much fun. It is absolutely, no matter what you drive there, is fun. In the U.S. though, I really love VIR. Road Atlanta is another great racetrack there. Those suit our race cars really well. There's some very difficult corners there. So those 2 definitely stand out in my mind as being in the U.S. here. I was looking forward to those 2 racetracks.
Elkhart Lake for me.
Is it the racetrack or the surrounding areas there?
It's the 3 Bs. Beers, brats, and babes. Is there a racetrack there? Yeah, okay.
Why I didn't ask that question?
Yes, sir. Yeah, you knew my answer, didn't you?
How long have you been running direct injection, and what does it do for power and speed?
We have been running direct injection on the C7 just this year. We ran it throughout our GT1 career, and then when they eliminated GT1 class, went to GT, of course we didn't offer it in production, so we couldn't run it. So because we now have homologated the C7, we're allowed to run direct injection. Direct injection increases, obviously, for the most part, we get a little more torque with it. We get actually a couple less horsepower, but the fuel economy becomes much better, and the drivability and throttle response becomes much better, which allows it to integrate so much more closely with the precision of the paddle shift. That whole nuance of all those things working together, the throttle's, by wire now, it's not a mechanical throttle. So the direct injection lets you to really put a fine edge on all that. It's not a more necessarily more power thing as much as it is economy and drivability. Right here, Walt. What for? The question is, Viper's running some 8.2 liter monstrosity. We got 5.5 liter. Can we get a bigger one? Well, we probably could, but we don't really need it. Yeah, they're probably going home after this year anyway. They couldn't get it done with 8.2. Here's how that worked. The rules when we developed that version C6 put the maximum displacement at 5.5 liter. When Dodge decided that they wanted to come racing, they petitioned on the basis of the car they build is marketed with this 8.2 liter engine, so it really made sense to them to want to use an 8 liter engine. And so as manufacturers, the way the process works is we get to voice our opinion to the sanctioning body, the FIA, and then they consider our opinion and then they make a decision. And it was pretty much unanimous that we said, we looked at the car, and certainly not a throwdown on the race team, okay? But the Viper is just not a very good car. It just isn't. It's 1988 technology. It's just not a very good car. And quite frankly, to have them be part of the series is always a plus. I know Ralph Gillids very well. They do a great job of marketing. Everybody's in the same boat. We wanted them to compete. We did everything we could to help them along the way to do that. We have a huge investment right now in our 5.5 liter engine from a durability, reliability, and performance standpoint. To move off of that, so the question would be, geez, if you're running if they have a 7 liter in the production car, can't you make the same claim that Viper made? Yes, we could do that, but at the point in time that we made the decision we made, our interest was in developing a smaller displacement engine. As a matter of fact, inside, and Steve Weslowski's in the audience right here, he was part of our program, my boss at the time. We were right on the edge of moving away from the 7 liter engine down to probably something in the 6 liter range, because we thought we could come close to developing the power, but improve fuel efficiency and throttle response with the smaller displacement engine. So the timing of that rule change really worked in our favor. We would have probably moved off the big motor anyway, eventually. And the 5.5 liter has proven to be a great engine. It's what's used in the variant is used in the prototype cars as well. And I think as we go forward in the automobile industry, you're going to begin to see smaller displacement engines with more sophisticated fuel delivery systems. That's going to be kind of the wave of the future. So we thought, all in all, we considered this a number of years ago. So we're not going to go back to the big motor. One more? Did you want to ask that, Adam, or are you just ordering us off the stage? We're having a pretty good time here, buddy. And these are the same people you're going to be putting the arm on for your crummy auction. By the way, Adam and I are pretty good buddies. And I think I'm the one that's going to be putting the arm on you. All right, let's do one more question. Yes?
The fundraising activity, we thought about maybe doing rides at the race events like the new Z06, and you donate money that goes to the motorsports park.
Where would you like the ride to be? Where do you want to go?
Well, I like the ride to be on the racetrack with
Yeah. Well,
Sign me up.
here's the deal. When we go to an event, unfortunately, we don't have the ability to get on that racetrack. We do the test program where you get to take rides, all great ideas, but to take what you're saying and move it to the next logical step would be what we're building across the street. Get your wallet ready. All right. We'll take one more. Yes, ma'am.
I do own a pair of yellow shorts, not quite that yellow, but
This is Velocity Yellow.
yeah, that's the correct yellow. Yes,
That's correct
Mine are a
yellow.
little bit sort of more faded than those would be.
Yeah.
And those don't come out besides golfing, so I'll leave the fancy shorts and things like that to Doug.
It follows my motto, which has always been, if it don't go, chrome it. We're going to close now. Tommy, Jim, anything you want to say in closing?
No, I mean it's great to be here again. It's always fun to see you guys, to see some of the same faces, at the racetrack and then here again. So thanks for coming out. And I can, from the hands earlier, I can tell you guys all come to the racetrack already. So definitely come on by, say hi, and have some fun.
I'm going to close with what I normally close with at my Corvette Corral thing, and that is thanking all of you for your support, your passion of our product. If you own something other than a GM car and you're getting ready to replace it, just go drive one of our things. I mean, if you have a Lexus or Mercedes, you might want to hop in a little Cadillac, or if you got a kid that's heading off to college and he needs a car, you might want to go look at a Sonic or Cruise. But get in them, drive them, see them. The same thing you see inside the C7, all right, in that elevated trim level and all the new fit and features exist throughout our entire line. This is my sales pitch. Just give it a shot. If you get in it and you don't like it, mom doesn't like it, she wants to get another Lexus, go ahead, do that. That's how this country works. But I'd just like you to give our stuff a fair chance, because that keeps us moving forward. You guys make it happen. We can't express enough appreciation for the support you give us We can't do this without you, and we do it for you. Thank you.
The two guys that are made in America. Thank you, guys. We'll see you next week.
Bye, buddy.